Hi class. My hope is that you'll watch this video after we've finished the class on Fideism. This is really the culminating part of the lecture, and it's seeking to pull together a number of the principles that the class itself has established. And what I'm trying to do in this particular lecture is to offer a Fideist apologetic, starting with Kierkegaard. The three approaches to apologetics that we've already considered, the deductive, the classical approach, the inductive, evidentialist approach, the presuppositional, reformed apologetic, all look at truth essentially as a set of facts or as a body of factual knowledge and propositions that correspond to reality. Where they differ is in their preferred or basic method of validating this truth and promoting it to others. Thus, the classical apologists prefer deductive and rational tests to determine truth. Evidentialists prefer the inductive empirical methods used in the sciences and other disciplines. And Reformed apologists generally appeal to the Bible as their source of authority and as a standard of truth. I want to show the insufficiency of these approaches according to the Fideists. Fideists consider these approaches to the knowledge of the truth of Christianity are insufficient for two very basic reasons. First of all, not facts to defend, but a person to know. Fideists take a different approach, not only to how we can know or validate truth, but more fundamentally to what is meant by truth. For Fideists, the truth accepted by Christians is not fundamentally, or in its most basic sense, a body of knowledge, but it's someone to know. In other words, truth is ultimately a person. His name is Jesus Christ. And truth is not just facts about the person of Jesus, but Jesus himself is the truth. At least this is at the heart of the Fideist argument. And as Fideists rightly insist, the essence of the Christian faith is not simply a list of propositions about Jesus Christ that must be believed, but the fact of actually knowing Christ, that is, knowing him personally. And it is precisely this aspect of Christianity, they say, that makes traditional apologetics not only inadequate, but worse than useless. For if we know God personally, what good are arguments for his existence? If we have a personal relationship with the living Christ, the Fideist asks, then will we not be offended by the suggestion that we must provide proof of his resurrection? So as Kierkegaard put it, there is an unholy inversion in all this business of having to prove everything first. I wonder if it would ever occur to anyone really in love to prove the blessedness of love with three basic reasons. But the fact is that men no longer believe, alas, and so they want to help themselves with the artificial legs of a little scientific scholarliness. Kierkegaard compares the person who engages in the defense of Christianity to a person who claims to be a lover and offers three reasons for the beauty of his beloved. Now, the second problem, though, is the spiritual problem. At the heart of it is this: the problem is not essentially intellectual, but rather spiritual. It's not a battle of philosophy that we're in here, but a battle against the rebellion of sin. And again, Kierkegaard argues that apologetics errs in treating the symptom of unbelief, intellectual doubt, while ignoring the real disease, disobedience and rebellion against God. Once more, from his journals and papers, it is claimed that arguments against Christianity arise out of doubt. This is a total misunderstanding, he says. The arguments against Christianity arise out of insubordination, reluctance to obey, mutiny against all authority. Therefore, until now, the battle against objections has been shadowboxing, because it has been intellectual combat with doubt instead of being ethical combat against mutiny. Wow, pretty heavy-duty stuff. And then thirdly, the curious nature of the object of the Christian faith. A further consideration is the nature of the object of faith. Not only is Christian faith characterized as trust in a person rather than mere intellectual agreement with a series of statements or doctrines, but it also trusts a person whose very nature defies rational validation. Specifically, Christian faith is a trust in God, the God who became incarnate in Jesus Christ. Here we have, according to Fideists, three problems for apologists. First, God transcends comprehension. God in his intrinsic being is beyond our comprehension. God is infinite, eternal, transcendent, and as such, beyond the reach of our finite logical analyses. Secondly is the problem of God as Trinity. The Christian revelation of this God claims that he is tripartite, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that this triunity of God is beyond our logical powers of understanding. And then thirdly, the transcendent God has become immanent man. To compound the problem of God's own nature as the transcendent and Trinitarian God is the fact that God, in the person of the Son, became incarnate as immanent, finite man. And that this man, although the omnipresent God who became incarnate, has come in weakness, poverty, and obscurity, culminating in his death on the cross. These are realities that the human imagination strains to grasp. But more than that, there's a tension between knowledge and faith, and reason and experience. According to Fideists, these fundamental and essential truths of the Christian message that we've just been talking about show us that God as the object of our faith is beyond understanding and beyond proof. In fact, some Fideists have even said that God is against understanding, which does not mean that he's actually illogical or irrational in his being and behavior, but that he contradicts man's very best understanding. Knowing God is not like knowing another human being about whom we can learn additional factual information and thus begin to close the gap in our knowledge of that person. Rather, true knowledge of God consists in acknowledging that he is beyond our understanding. And again, Kierkegaard explains, the rule for the relationship between man and humanness is the more I think about it, the better I understand it. In the relationship between man and God, the rule is the more I think about the divine, the less I understand it. As a child, I think I am very close to God. And the older I become, the more I discover that we are infinitely different. And the more deeply I feel the distance, and in Casu, the less I understand God, that is, the more obvious it becomes to me how infinitely exalted he is. Kierkegaard exclusively uses the formula faith against understanding in this connection. God cannot be the highest superlative of the human. He is qualitatively different. From this, at first comes incomprehensibility, which grows with the development of man's understanding, and thereby faith, which believes against understanding, is again potentiated. Karl Barth, that great theologian, quotes with approval Martin Luther's assertion that we must not regard reason or its work when we speak of faith and God's work. Here, God works alone, and reason is dead, blind, and compared to this work, an unreasoning block. Barth warns that theology cannot claim to resolve the apparent contradictions it contains. Fideists believe it is impossible to construct a rational system in which all reality, including God and his world, is located. And thus their response to postmodernism, for instance, is different from that of the other approaches. The classical apologist, the evidentialist, the reformed apologist all agree that it is possible and desirable for us to have a worldview, or more precisely, a God and worldview, a systematic view of all reality that is logically coherent as well as comprehensive. Thus, each approach is committed to refuting the postmodernist doctrine that a comprehensive, objective worldview is possible. Or is impossible. In varying ways, each seeks to show that Christianity, and it alone, offers a true and satisfying worldview that meets these criteria, to show that the Christian faith offers a systematic view of reality that can and should be accepted by all people. But the fideist thinks such an approach is ill-advised. Rather than advocating Christianity as the true worldview, fideists argue we should advocate Christ as the true word. And it despairs of necessarily being able to offer a rational, consistent, coherent worldview. Reformed apologetics and fideism are sometimes confused because of their similar demand that faith be placed firmly in God's revelation without reliance on any reasoning. And both also speak of God's revelation as self-attesting, which adds to the similarities. However, one significant difference between the two approaches is found in their view of faith and of experience. For fideists, faith is also self-attesting, at least in some sense. That is, fideists believe that faith is, or carries with it, its own evidence or basis of assurance. Kierkegaard states this idea rather plainly. Away with all this world history and reasons and proofs for the truth of Christianity. There is only one proof, that of faith. If I actually have a firm conviction, and this, to be sure, is a qualification of intense inwardness oriented to spirit, then to me, my firm conviction is higher than reasons. It is actually the conviction which sustains the reasons, not the reasons which sustain the convictions. But saying that faith is its own proof, Kierkegaard does not mean simply that simply believing is itself self-attesting. Remember that for him, faith is not mere intellectual sanction, but a passionate commitment to Jesus Christ, which must be the result of a person's despair and helplessness for Christ. Again, he says, there is only one and quite rightly pathological proof of the truth of Christianity. When the anxiety of sin and the burdened conscience constrain a man to cross the narrow line between despair unto madness and Christianity. Thus, the faith that is its own proof is the faith that is expressed in a person's life in such a way that there can be no doubt about his experience or his relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, a 21st century theologian, Donald Blesh, offers a nuanced approach to the place of experience in the Christian faith. His main concern is to avoid both objectivism on the one hand and subjectivism on the other. and to find a basis of certainty that is neither subjective nor objective. Well, you can see that's going to be a tall order. This basis is the revelation of God. The basis of certainty is God speaking through objective event and subjective experience. This view of Blesh derives from British theologian P.T. Forsyth. And let me read this paragraph from Blesh's A Theology of Word and Spirit. What Christians have is not self-certainty, but soul certainty, according to Forsyth. Or even better, God certainty. It is not the fact of our experience, but the fact which we experience that shapes and determines Christian faith. In other words, it's not just about having an experience, but it's the experience itself that shapes and determines Christian faith. What Forsyth says is quite sound. We have not two certitudes about these supreme matters produced by authority and experience, but one, produced by authority in experience. Not a certitude produced by authority and then corroborated by experience. So I read it in the Bible, so I believe that it's true, and I've experienced the forgiveness of my sins, and so those two things are two separate things that support my faith. So let me go back and read again. We have not two certitudes about these supreme matters produced by authority and experience, but one produced by authority in experience. Not a certitude produced by authority and then corroborated by experience, but one produced by an authority active only in experience, and especially the corporate experience of a church. What Blesh is saying, and I think what Forsyth is saying, is that an encounter with God, with the God of the Bible, is the basis of faith. And it's not just that this encounter substantiates what the Word was saying. It's that the Word is the encounter that is creating the experience. We see here that evangelical Fideism seeks to support the objective revelation of God as the basis of our confidence or certainty, but at the same time sees the inner assurance of faith produced by the Spirit as closely integrated to this objective ground. And so the significance of this whole discussion for us as Pentecostals, I think, is pretty obvious. We are not people who just sort of like, well, I read in the Bible about this baptism in the Holy Spirit, and then I spoke in other tongues, so I guess those two things. No. The Bible is the Word that created the encounter with God. And it's that Word-created encounter that is the basis of my faith. I think that this does a great job of giving a place for experience within the realm of objective reality and not just my subjective experience versus your subjective experience. Anyway, I hope that this has been a helpful video, and I'd love to discuss the results of your watching it. Lord bless you. Make sure you watch this after we've had the lecture, and I think everything's going to go well.